How you doing, good people? This is the 8-Bit Animal, and today we're going to talk about a game that is actually a direct port of like the big mascot game for the TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine if you're from Japan. Now, Hudson always showed love to Nintendo and the Famicom. They were one of the earlier supporters of the Famicom. And when it was time, they used what they learned with the Famicom as far as programming console games to release their own console, the PC Engine, around 1986-ish, something like that, 87. And for a few years, it did all right, but it didn't have like a mascot. And when it came over to the US as the TurboGrafx 16 and was published through NEC, it needed a mascot. All great consoles in the US have a mascot, right? Well, at first it was Keith Courage and Alpha Zones, but that didn't hold on to gamers the way Super Mario Brothers and Alex Kidd and later Sonic the Hedgehog did, right? So NEC went back to the drawing board, and in 1989 in Japan they released Bonk's Adventure. Bonk's Adventure was incredibly popular in Japan, and they brought it to the US, and it became the thing for the TurboGrafx 16. It was the thing for the TurboGrafx 16 in the States. NEC had the TurboGrafx 16 had its mascot. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and on their way out of the door with the NES, Hudson decided, hey, let's see if this catches on the NES. And it could have, but one, it was honestly one of the last games released on the console, and then it was also just wasn't as good as its original source material. Today, we're going to take a look at that NES port of Bonk's Adventure. Now, Bonk's Adventure stars Bonk, a little bald dinosaur guy with a really big head. And Bonk is on a mission to rescue Princess Za. And Princess Za was kidnapped by King Drool, who's another big dinosaur guy. And yeah, it's just your standard hop and bop, rescue the princess platformer fare, right? And the thing with Bonk's Adventure is that he uses his head as a weapon. And by and large, there's not a lot of power-ups in the game. You collect fruit for points. You collect these little head things. And then some little characters release like meat. Like just meat on a bone. Bonk eats a piece of meat and becomes kind of feral. Eats a big piece of meat and is invincible for a period of time. It's almost like a Starman in Mario Brothers, right? By and large, the game is okay. The problem with the NES version of Bonk's Adventure is that the controls aren't really as tight as they should be. The controls on the TurboGrafx 16 port of the game are solid. The controls on the NES, kinda slippery. They're not really as great as they are on the TurboGrafx 16. And it's a shame because the game looks good. It sounds pretty good considering. Yeah, everything works except the controls. The controls aren't really there. And that's the biggest disappointment of this whole thing. Also the timing, because by this point, most of us, anybody who would have gotten this game, we were gone. We had moved on to newer tech, to the Super Nintendo, which was about 2-3 years old at this point. The Genesis was like 4 years old at this point. Yeah, we were all out of the way. I don't know who this was for, but here we are. All right. Now, if you decide you want to get a copy of this, just get a repro card, because legit NES copies of Bonk's Adventure, the cheapest I saw was $800. You could probably get a Famicom copy for like $55-$60. But the NES game, it's averaging over $1,000. It's in Little Samson territory. It's nuts. But very decent game with iffy controls on the very tail end of the NES life cycle. This is what you get. So yeah, I would advise you, if you want this game, track down a copy on the TurboGrafx 16, which ain't cheap either, or a Famicom copy, or a repro card. I can't justify this much for a single game at all. But, yeah, ain't my money. Do what you do. You do what you want when you're popping, I guess. This has been the 8-Bit Animal. And I'll catch you beautiful people tomorrow. 8-Bit Animal. Tomorrow. Yeah, this was probably the last ninja game on the NES. Shame too. The genre had a great run,